Genesis had a lot of like shooters. And when I say shooters, I mean like, left to right, spaceship shmups. Exactly. They had a lot of them. One of my favorites was Garyus.
This is a game I don't think I've ever even heard of this game. So you brought it up, as we were preparing for the show. And funny enough, this game is getting re-released. They just announced it like today or yesterday. It's getting re-released by Limited Run in a Genesis version. So I'm guessing usually when they do it, it's usually with harder to find Genesis titles. A lot of times they're like more expensive, and that's why they do the re-release. But I mean, I know nothing about this game. So tell me about Garyus.
It was just like you said, a shmup. It was just a left to right spaceship shooter. But again, when the megs, how much memory each cartridge had was like the hot word.
Had some big megs on her.
It did. And, big enemies, big bosses, boss battles, that took up the whole screen. Your ship got multiple weapons. You had a lot of enemies on the screen, as well as all the bullets, because the bullets, were kind of little pellets that you saw and that filled the screen. And it was, again, at the time, the gaming magazines like raved about it. And it's like, okay, you have to get this game. If you're into shooters, you have to get this game. And I, to this day, that's one of my favorite shooters of all time, Gary's. And then you told me that they're re-releasing it. And I was like, what?
Yeah, I sent you that picture. I was like, is this the game that you were talking about the other week? Man. I was like, I can't believe that this is the same game you brought up like as we were preparing to record.
That is it. Yep.
So that version I sent you, there's like two different versions. I think one version's like $150, but there's like a pretty big, like a pretty hefty version you get with like a lot of bonuses. It's like $50 over on Limited Run. If you guys want to check it out, we're not sponsored. I'm not telling you to, nobody's paying me to tell you that. Go check it out if you want to, because the physical copy of the game, I'm guessing, is probably way more than $50 at this point. Check your Game Eye. If you don't have it, go get it.
Yeah, I'm checking now because I know it's up there. Oh man, that game was so much fun. But then, in that whole era, you had Thunder Force, you had in Sector X, just a lot of different space shooters. Ranger X was good. So yeah, Garyus, I'm looking at my Game Eye now. I do still own it. Garyus complete in box is $161.
Okay, so it's not unbelievably expensive, but certainly you can get away with spending $50 for this nice version of the game that comes with a full color manual and like a bunch of bonuses. Go check it out on Limited Run if you guys are interested. It's up there now. I think you have probably like 30 days to make your purchase if you want. Earlier we mentioned Street Fighter. There's a lot of great fighting games on here, so I want to kind of clump these together. We can talk about them however you want. There was Street Fighter. I believe Genesis got Championship version, which is the version I'm most familiar with. Great version of Street Fighter. Probably not as well known as like the Super Nintendo versions, or of course the arcade versions. Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3 were all in the Genesis. TMNT Tournament Fighter, Eternal Champions. Out of all of these, I think I spent the most time probably with Mortal Kombat, followed right by Street Fighter. But these are all like very popular, like well-known games in the Genesis.
They were. Mortal Kombat in particular, that was the whole big debate. Well, Mortal Kombat at the time was so controversial. The government was trying to, ban it because it glorified violence. I was unbeatable in the arcade, bro. That was my game. I was unbeatable. I was so cocky. If someone came to me in the arcade, I would have them pick who I played as to destroy them. I'm like,
that is some cocky shit.
Oh man, I was cocky. And then we got it at home.
Is this MK1 or 2 or
MK1?
MK1. Okay, so there was like
the 2.
There was eight characters on the first game, I think. 8 or 10, something like that.
I forget.
But 2 had a lot more characters, so that's probably where you couldn't be pulling that, because 2 had like 30 characters or something.
And they changed the mechanics, the fight mechanics. So it was like, oh man, I suck at this game now.
Well, 2 was a little bit faster, right? Like everything kind of flowed a little bit faster. It was like, harder to like counter or like do any kind of like blocking or anything in the second one, as far as I remember.
Yeah, and again, it's the art, and this is when I believe the arcade experience at home really started to take off. Because we had a lot of, again, the arcades were popular then, and we had NBA Jam and Street Fighter and the Mortal Kombat, and the Mortal Kombat for the Genesis didn't look as good as the Super Nintendo counterpart, but they kept the blood in.
Yeah, man,
that
was such a big like. I remember making fun of because during the console wars you had your side during that time. Of course, I'm older now and realize that was all stupid shit. But you had you will go to some time like, oh, you want to play Mortal Kombat? Hell yeah. Super Nintendo, I'm like, I'm good. You got a Genesis lying around, I'll play it on there. Yeah, I need that blood, man.
The Super Nintendo looked better. I think it sounded better, but there was no blood.
I'll give you the sound. It definitely sounded better for sure.
It did, but there was no blood. And that was the one thing with the Genesis. The characters were smaller. The colors weren't as bright as a Super Nintendo.
I think on the Super one you could put a code in or something to like get blood in the game or something. You could do something weird to get blood in that version of the game, I think.
Yeah, see, I don't remember that, but the Genesis one outsold it because of the blood.
Yeah. You can't show that to somebody who's 12 or 13 years old and be like, you want to get the one that doesn't have blood, or do you want the one with the blood? I'm like, no, man, I want the one with the blood,
We had Mortal Kombat, so many good fighters. You had Mortal Kombat, we had Samurai Showdown.
Oh yeah, you
Samurai
did.
Showdown, was fantastic. We got also the King of Fighters, Fatal Fury franchise as far as fighters. Eternal Champions I won't classify as a good fighter.
Okay.
It was different. But it had a lot to when Street Fighter hit. A lot of people waited forever because that was Nintendo's big ace in the hole. They had Street Fighter.
They had the better version of Street Fighter. True.
They had a great, there's the only version of Street Fighter.
At first, yes.
At first, and then they had Turbo. But it was Street Fighter, and you couldn't get Street Fighter anywhere else.
Right.
And then there was talk that Sega was going to release a 6-button controller. It's like, oh, are they going to release a 6-button controller?
Thank God they did.
They did, and then that was the talk. It's like, okay, are we finally going to get Street Fighter? We're going to finally get Street Fighter, and all the gaming magazines, like no one knew, but Sega was putting out a 6-button controller, and we got Eternal Champions, which was in, Mortal Kombat, but then they announced Street Fighter Champion Edition.
So I'm going to throw something in here just because you put it in my mind. Everybody, just stay with us for 1 second. I had to pull something off the shelf here. Sega has done a re-release in the past 2 years. They made a mini console. It was a very good mini console. Why would you put the 3-button controller in this console? You fixed the controller. Stop. Yes, people have nostalgia for this in their little brains. This is not the superior controller. Should never have been in this console. Then you have Nintendo Switch Online announcing they're going to have an expansion pack for Sega Genesis and N64 games. And you give us this again.
Oh, no, they didn't. Oh.
They did. Look, Nintendo Genesis. Could you ever think that they were together? They are now. And they gave you the shittier controller for no reason.
Wow.
Sorry.
Wow. Wow.
Think of the limitations they put on themselves. Not only did they give you the more nostalgic, shittier controller, now there's a whole bunch of games for the Nintendo Switch Online that I don't even want to play without a 6-button controller.
Why would they not give you a 6-button controller? You couldn't play Street Fighter with anything but a 6-button controller.
I know. And look, half the games didn't even use those other buttons, but at least they were there if you needed to use them.
Yep.
And in the year 2021, Nintendo and Sega think it's a better idea to give us this controller than a 6-button one.
Well, it's okay. The 6-button, when they released the 6-button controller, we got Street Fighter Champion Edition, and I was happy. and I was happy. And for those who don't know, the only difference between Street Fighter 2 and the Champion Edition was the Champion Edition allowed you to play as the bosses from the beginning.
Oh yeah, you're right. You could pick M Bison right away.
Right away, yeah, because in the original you had to beat them, and then I don't even think you could play them. You just fought them. But then Champion Edition allowed you to pick the bosses from the beginning.
Yeah, again, that's the most familiar I am with Street Fighter because I had a Genesis, so I played it there. I played it in the arcade. Very rarely played a Super Nintendo version of the game, but
yep. And then we got Street Fighter, Super Street Fighter, which gave you the new characters. But once they get released that 6-button controller, it was like, the floodgates opened up. At that point, they got all the Street Fighter games from going forward. A lot more fighters that used it, like the Mortal Kombat. So we got Mortal Kombat 2, Mortal Kombat 3. And, they really used the 6-button controller.